So welcome to Transform Gov, the podcast that shares real insights about how technology and data is changing how public sector services are accessed and also delivered. And as always, we talk to the people who are on the ground at the coalface to share their experiences. So it's very, very real. And Transform Gov is actually part of the Ireland eGovernment Awards, and it's brought to you in partnership with Accenture. I'm Maeve Kneafsey, and today's conversation couldn't be more apt. With government now poised to declare a housing emergency and launch a new state housing infrastructure fund and restrict institutional investors from buying up homes, the pressure is on to deliver housing that's faster, smarter, and of course at scale. And we know that's a huge challenge. It's much easier than the words. That's where today's guest actually comes in. His name is Gavin Duffy, and he is founder and CEO of RealSim, an Irish company using immersive 3D digital twins to help planners, local authorities and developers to test, plan, and really look at real projects before a single brick is laid. So intriguing. And we all know that every day of delay on building projects is going to cost us millions. So Gavin's solution could change how Ireland designs, approves and delivers housing. So Gavin, with that big opening, you're very welcome to Transform Gov.
Thank you very much, Maeve.
So Gavin, in the context of government declaring a housing emergency and fast-tracking approvals, what do you think in your experience can be the causes of the biggest delays in terms of, and can RealSim save some of those time and barriers that we currently experience, do you think?
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of coverage in the media, particularly amongst developers, in terms of their pain in trying to get projects through the planning system, and the very adversarial system we have, whereby a developer puts something forward and there's objections, but then it's escalated, goes through on board Panala or Commission Panula, and then into judicial review. This isn't a reflection of lots of good information.
Mm-hmm.
That process is a reflection of poor information.
Okay.
So the systems we have or not, you can go onto any planning portal and download hundreds of technical documents.
Mm-hmm.
Yet there are people who are objecting on the basis of very, very simple things like, overshadowing line of sight, sometimes simply not understanding the concept of what is being proposed. So there are also lots of really, really good projects that are simply not getting off the ground. I
suppose in a way, Gavin, the objections that can come up, to some, development, proposal development, are not always that people aren't just being cantankerous. It's the fact that they can't actually read what's there, isn't it? The documents are almost impenetrable.
They are.
Yeah.
So this isn't a criticism of the general public. It's a criticism of the system.
Yes.
Of the poor information. It's the lack of accessible information, basically. We're all very visual people. And very often the questions that people have are really very simple. What does it look like from my front door, from my back garden? And is it going to affect me? Sometimes it really does boil down to that. I know you've got other state bodies and other entities that kind of look at the larger macro picture. But really on an individual basis, that's really all it's about. And
how's it going to affect me, right?
Yeah, and the technology is there to answer that simple question, and it's like various pieces of a jigsaw lying on a table, and just nobody's put them together.
Yes, yeah, and look, that comes to the question: if you were to change, something in relation to the planning to make it faster for us to get homes built, what would you change? What would you like to see happen?
As I say, there's lots of information. The main, in terms of visual information that's put out, and we've been involved in the planning system for a while, and we get asked to produce what's called photo montages, and that's basically a render of a 3D model superimposed on a photograph from a specific perspective. And if you look at any large scale development, you'll have CGI, sometimes a booklet of CGIs and photo montages. Those photo montages are actually designed to show you how it's not going to impact. They're not, the actual remit of those isn't to show you how it's going to look like.
Okay.
It's how it's not going to impact. So there's even a negative slant from that. So it's very often the vast majority of those photo montages will be taken from behind a tree or a house and show a red outline saying, well, you're not going to see it from here. But that's not what that's not people want to know. They want to say, I actually do want to see what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
Those renders are taken from a 3D model. When we started business, the vast majority of architects were still designing in 2D, and then only you'd go to a graphic designer to model it up in 3D. Now they're designing in 3D. So we've got this ridiculous situation at the moment where you're designing in 3D, you're having to dumb down to 2D to submit to planning.
Yeah, I know. In fact, we had exactly the same conversation with Sean Mann from the RIAI, or Institute of Architects. So you're going backwards.
Essentially, you're going backwards to submit this information to planners, to members of the public, to elected officials, when an architect will admit they have all the information on the site now, and the next question is, well, seeing that in context, and that's where the concept of digital twin comes in, or the larger environmental digital twin comes in.
So it's like a virtual reality experience of what something will actually look like in a physical way.
Yeah, if you can put an architect's model into a 3D, and most people are somewhat familiar with, so we say, Google Earth, in a Google Earth type environment, except it's a bit more detailed and validated in terms of spatial accuracy. It really is as simple as that.
Right? It's not an interpretation.
It's not an interpretation. No. Everything has the basis upon good 3D environment models is aerial mapping and ground mapping. And I say we've got off-the-shelf aircraft mapping, which happens every couple of years. And then, with the advance of drone technology, you can now put drones up and they will give you really detailed 3D point clouds and mapping. So you can get stuff that's right up to present. If there's been any localized changes, you can really
pick it up from the drone.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I suppose I know there's some talk about, well, the planning has got a bit better. It's it's online, but it's not really. Is it based still on 3D? Yes, it is. From what you're telling me, anyway. What does it look like, actually?
The current planning, only a few years ago, for a large application, you'd have basically a van pull up outside a planning office with 6 copies of reams and reams of paper, and they all had to be scanned because they were going to maybe 6 or 7 different departments within a local authority. Now, e-planning is essentially just submitting digital documents. That's how far, we've been working in the digital document field, since Microsoft came up with Windows, 20 years ago. Planning has really only just gone digital. So, I would hope it's not going to take 20 years to get with the
actually, just even to get where the architects are, right? Which is
basically
which is basically using 3D models.
Yeah.
And sometimes people think of 3D visuals as just kind of pretty pictures, right? But actually, they're very trustworthy and accurate, aren't they? And there's it really enhances decision making, or so I believe. So how do the 3D visualizations enhance decision making, for example?
I've got numerous examples.
Examples are great. They make it real, right?
Yeah, and sometimes I like to go for the small stuff sometimes rather than the big fancy stuff. We all know that you see fancy pictures with the big developments. There was a project I was involved with for Mayo County Council on a greenway through Achill Sound. They didn't have any off-the-shelf aircraft imagery. That part of the world just didn't get any survey attention. But again, we used drone technology, used local supplier to fly a drone survey. We created a nice 3D model from air and did our own sort of street level based mapping. Created an actual train model, and 2 local engineers basically went door to door with that model to show them, where the new position. There was a change to some boundary walls, change into path, road was being changed. Where the drop of the curve to the entrance to our gateway. Really simple stuff like that.
But the things that people really can get concerned about, right?
You just wouldn't see that in a standard black and white CAD plan. It'd be difficult to interpret. So they got feedback. In general, it was positive, but they wanted some changes to here and there, and they came back with those changes. We iterated. They went back to ask, the various landowners aside the greenway, and they got 100% backing. And I love that idea of a couple of local engineers sitting down at a kitchen table, just talking to some locals and basically getting that 100% backing. And it really is about the removal of the fear of the unknown, because that's what I feel anyway, certainly in our experience, where a lot of the objections come from. And
look, I may not interpret this correctly. They could be trying to pull the wool over my eyes on something, therefore I'll object. I mean, I'm exaggerating, but the point is that when you see something in 3D, you kind of go, okay, I get it now.
And obviously every local knows their own area. So and we have to model obviously the existing environment. If the existing environment did not look as they understand it to be, then that would cast doubt on what we're about to show. So that's the importance of the mapping side of things.
Of course.
You have to show the existing environment, and once they see, I've been at a consultation. I particularly remember one in for the Port of Cork in Ringaskiddy, and the people in Cove were very concerned about all this big development in Ringaskiddy going to destroy their skyline. And I remember asking the guy, well, where's your house? And he showed me. I went directly to the back window, and his first reaction was, oh, and that's my view. So he came in with a slightly negative, but first of all, he understood that what I was showing him was accurate. And then I pressed the button, and there was an immediate deflation, so we say, of that fear, because obviously when you see things laid out on big maps and it's all top down, and it's very difficult to understand, well, actually that's almost a kilometre away. It changes depending on what time of day you're looking at it. Again, the technology we have shows the lighting in any time of the day, weather, because very often the still images, not only are they from chosen curated perspectives, they're also at a particular lighting scenario. So, we live in a world that's very, very dynamic, particularly in Ireland. So to be able to show the range of lighting, and then maybe if it is a little bit reflective in one part of the day, basically, 11 other hours of the day, you're not going to see it, or in a different lighting regime. So to give that more holistic impression of what something's really going to look like, I think is very powerful.
Well, look, and we're going to go on now to talk about a very interesting case where you've been involved with the government and how you've applied 3D. But before that, we have to have a very quick break to say thank you to our partner, Accenture.
Through the power of cloud, data and AI, Accenture is helping the public sector by blending human ingenuity, technology and a delivery-focused culture to turn their ambitions into action. Be ready for any challenge by adopting a continuous reinvention mindset to deliver human-centric services that adapt and grow with your needs. Contact the team at Accenture to find out more.
So we're back with Gavin Duffy from RealSim. We're talking about all things 3D and digital twins and digital cities. And I want to talk to him now about Jersey, because I think it's, at the time, certainly when we first were talking, it was the first government so far using RealSim to support planning assessments. So what practical lessons do you think we could learn in Ireland from that?
Yeah, I was very fortunate to be introduced to Jersey way back in 2011 by the mapping partner. So our input data is mapping data. At the time, we were buying area mapping data from a company called BKS Northern Ireland, who were the only sort of independent survey operator in the country. And they were flying the island. So I couldn't get, it's a not a big island, but it's a population of 100,000 people, reasonably well off. Anybody that doesn't like a development have the means to object. So there's a kind of a...
It's imperative then to get it right?
Exactly, yeah. People need to be able to stand over their decisions. So at the time, Google Earth was a thing, and they were, they asked their mapping supplier, can you help us put, 3D SketchUp? SketchUp was an independent company at the time, it was owned by Google, but it was free. So any architect that was playing around with 3D were using SketchUp. Can we put SketchUp models into Google Earth and see things better? And the guys in Northern Ireland said, well, we don't do that, but a company in Galway that does.
Oh, so that's how you got into
that's how we got in. Yeah. So we did a pilot project for them in St. Helier. And it was actually the first time, because previously we were actually using a third-party software in Australia, and they were no longer supporting it. And it kind of put us in a position where we had to make an important business decision, whether we start developing something ourselves or rely on an aging platform. And it was the best thing sort of could have happened to us, because it then made us.
Yeah.
So at that time, the gaming world, the way the gaming world works, there's only a handful, less than a handful really, of what's called middleware game engines, which are used by all the gaming companies all over the world. So it's a bit like, the way Skoda and Volkswagen have the same engine. You might all have similar engine, but you build different bits around it. And this is what we were doing with this game engine. So we essentially built our own version of what the Australians had. It looked better because it was more advanced. And because it was already being used by a million indie game developers around the world, we knew it wasn't going to disappear. We had a good support network, and we started building our own geospatial tools around that and figured out how to get the mapping data into the game engine without losing the space fidelity and all these things. So we're sort of standing on the technological shoulders of that massive industry to give something that is spatially accurate and yet really easy to use. And
it's funny, isn't it, the way it's gaming technology marries into something, a completely different world. But, if anyone's ever played a game, you know how fantastically real they are. But of course, your accuracy of the real world.
Yeah. And the construct is the same. You still need a terrain mesh. You still need something to go over it. You still need the kind of... So the elements that you need to replicate a real world is the exact same elements you need to replicate, some fantastical environment in Fortnite or wherever it is. Yeah. So it's just a different application. So that kind of started off a process in Jersey, and we learned a lot in that process, including...
If you don't mind me asking, what were you asked to do in Jersey? What was your...
Well, initially to build a model of St. Helier, which is their main town city. And because their local government is the same as their national government, in other words, when I go over there to meet the people, I'm saying, and here's the Minister of Environment down the corridor. In other words, there's a layer of bureaucracy
that's eliminated by
a small island, so they can get things done. And they made the decision that, we want to receive models from architects. Now, there was some resistance from architects. Someone said, we don't want to be, submitting our 3D models and, their our IP or X or Y. Within a couple of years of the system working, that completely changed because they started to realize, well, actually, our planning applications can get processed much quicker. Plus, we were giving the applicant architect a nice 3D viewer that they didn't have previously, which they could then show to their own client, whether they're somebody just building an extension to a house or a developer or whatever.
I presume what you mean by that is a way of showing the view of what the end result would look like.
End result, And the state of Jersey then invested in basically a complete island model. So they were at a place where Ireland is at the moment, where all our mapping is 2D. So you go for a planning application, you get a planning pack, which is essentially 2D OS maps. You go to Jersey, in your planning pack is a 3D model with, or basically the same sort of tiles of information, but a 3D terrain mesh, orthophotography, and all the buildings. And you're simply asked, as an applicant or the architect working for the applicant, put your design in that SketchUp model. And we chose SketchUp at the time because that was mainly being used, and it still is. And it's that simple. It's not sort of rocket science. It's basically just taking. So it means that even as an architect, architects today don't generally have all the survey information around their site. They have to go and spend money to get somebody to say what's the height of the neighbours. In Jersey, they do. It's all there.
So that's the thing that I get really excited by. And I think people don't realise perhaps that benefit is that the kind of infrastructure that's already there. Yeah. If you have a city or a country that has a digital twin or a virtual version of itself, all of that infrastructure that's already there is in it, isn't it? So you don't have to go and replicate it when you're going to put together a design to fit into it.
No.
So I don't have to come... I mean, there's all sorts of stuff you know better than I, like, where the water pipes are, where the cables are. I presume that must be massive saving for the architect as well as for the for those approving the planning.
Yeah.
I mean, is that the case? Tell us how that looks and works. And you must have had it in Jersey.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, we're mainly dealing with, so we say, the above ground elements. So we've got, obviously the location, the lie of the land, so to speak.
The walls, the roads.
The road boundary roads, the trees. Mm-hmm. We've been able to integrate an extensive tree database that they have. And we know the heights of all the trees, and even our gaming engine allows us to let the leaves fall off in winter. Mm-hmm. So you can even see winter versus summer views. It's interesting enough, through some of the work we're doing more recently with Dublin, we're probably going beyond what they're doing in Jersey in terms of being able to add in additional layers of information.
Oh, tell us about that. Look, you started with Jersey, you proved it, and then I presume things have happened since then, but in Dublin in particular.
Yeah, well, we've been fortunate to work with 3 of the Dublin councils at the moment. The Smart Dublin entity sort of covers all 4 councils. At the moment, we've been upgrading the Dublin Docklands model, which started in 2018, and we were able to put that online. So that was a big advance. From when we started off, I had to give like a big computer with a graphics card because the inbuilt graphics chips of standard computers weren't good enough, and the broadband wasn't good enough. Now standard laptops do have that graphics capability. The broadband is fast enough, and you can now view these things online. So we did that for Smart Hub, and then they were asking, can we add sensor information? So literally, very, very recently, we were able to add live data from sensors in the Liffey, giving the level, the temperature, velocity. So there's now starting to become sort of a dynamic digital twin with live information coming in. Again, these are things being done on a pilot basis, and we're delighted with Fingal. I know you've had Fingal in here previously.
They were last year's winner of the overall award for the Balbriggan.
So and again, something else developed since we started way back in 2008 was virtual reality. It's the same content, but that feeling of immersiveness, which really is very, very impactful. And
so you're combining two things together: 3D modeling and the virtual reality experience of being able to sit within it.
It's literally the ability to go inside the model. The content is the same as looking at a desktop. The difference is you're looking at a rectangle when you're on a screen. The VR allows you to almost seamlessly, feel like you're inside the model, and that's very, very impactful.
So it seems to me like the 3D modeling is bringing together lots and lots of dispersed data that is, say, just in a city. In one case, it could be sensor information. Another could be engineering. The roads, the transport.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about who benefits from it, if we're talking back to the kind of the whole process, it's for us members of the public, it's great because we know what we're going to experience, we know what it's going to look like, we can feel it. We, maybe perhaps we don't have any objections because we actually see it, or the objections are ones that really do need to be looked at.
Good point.
Then from on the side of an architect, it enables that person to really show what they're going to do and what something looks like much more effectively. A lot less paperwork, okay? But from the planners and the people who actually are going to grant permission, there's loads of benefits there for them, isn't there? Can we talk about some of those? Because they're often the ones that we think are blocking things.
Yeah. Well, like in the present system, and I've been involved, as say, in many planning applications, that photo montage process I told you about previously, that very often, you'd submit your planning application, would have a number of photo montages, which are generally chosen by the applicant. And the planner might come back and say, well, actually, I want some from here, here, and here. And there'd be a back and forth process just on that information alone, but it should go from weeks to months sometimes.
Yeah.
In Jersey, when they have the model, that visual assessment is done in 1 hour.
Compared to something that could drag on.
It's taken for weeks and months. And at the end of the day, we'll never give you a holistic view because you're still only getting a few perspectives from a few. So the model exists there. So from the time saving is significant. And you mentioned the point there, too much time is spent simply trying to understand the development as opposed to properly critique the merits of the design. And I think that's where real benefits are from a planner's perspective to actually dig into the merits of the design, potentially seeing flaws that you mightn't see from a few handful of photo montages. And even the most skilled architects and planners will miss things from a 2D CAD plan because, again, they're just literally slices through a model.
Yes.
Whereas when you're actually looking at a model, you see that in every perspective.
Yes. Yeah. And even talking, I suppose, if we moved on, let's say we've made the planner's job, right, through the 3D modelling and virtual reality, a much better process because they can assess accurately what's there and make decisions or question something or ask for a different perspective or see it in different ways. But then I suppose when you move into the implementation for all of the different people involved in that, whether it be the electrician, the person who's building the underground car park, whatever it happens to be, they can start seeing how whatever they're doing is impacting each other.
Well, this is the interesting thing. So it's, again, an interesting development which has happened since we even started the business was this thing called building information modeling. And a lot of architects are building these BIM models, they're called. Technically, they're not really required for planning assessment, but they're built because they are, if we be honest, a form of quantity assessment. They can assign quantities to the materials, to everything, a cost association with everything in the design, and they can then say to whoever the developer is, it's going to cost this. But, for planning, we just need the architectural, so we say geometry, construct of it. But that BIM model is a very valuable model, as you say, going into the construction phase, helping people to understand, clash detection, where, things should go, in what orders they should go. And they actually have, for larger buildings, they have a life cycle long beyond even when the building is built. They can become a part of the asset management aspect of the building. Now, that's not an area we're in, but therein it lies the value of a digital asset. It's not just for one particular part of the process. It can actually it can be manipulated and added upon, and there's different tools for different things, but the basic information is there. So you are investing in something that will give you a massive return on investment, not just in planning, but through construction and on into its life cycle, basically.
I mean, it's almost like a domino where you kind of fix something. You can do it as a kind of a virtually rather than really, right? And then say, if I do that, what happens? What's the ripple effect? And that can be seen much more clearly, I suppose, when you've got a digital version of what's being built.
One of the big advantages, you can't really, easily do scenario analysis in the real world. You can make mistakes. You can test all sorts of things you want digitally. So, the more you test, the more options you look at. It's cheap and easy and better to make mistakes in the digital world than in the real world.
Yes, well, exactly. Lots like costly.
Yeah.
And in terms of obstacles, for making kind of immersive modelling standard tool in planning and housing, what are the barriers, do you think? Is it cost? Is it kind of a mindset? Is it capacity? What do you think is causing why aren't we having it as a kind of a must-do?
It's not legislated for, first of all. There is no requirement. Like, the actual specification for what's required for submitting to planning is relatively fluffy and loose in terms of that sort of visual data. There's a general acceptance. We need to see things, but again, say the photomontage is a kind of a impact assessment. How it's not impacting, it almost takes a negative approach to which is an odd way of looking at it. The government have recently brought in a requirement for all buildings or projects over 1 million to have a BIM model. Now, again, that's part of the cost control aspect of things. And they're really borrowing from the UK, who've done this since 2016. So they've sort of put a stake in the ground to say, now, yes, 3D modeling is important. That's really for the construction side of things. They really need to go a step forward and say, what, acknowledge that all these models are being generated. Let's have them for the planning process. Now, I will admit also on the other side of the equation, developer, there are some developers who feel that more information generates more questions. I feel it's the opposite. Is the fact that it's actually
solves.
It solves. It removes objections because it removes that fear of the unknown. But if they're obligated to submit the models, they'll just have to do it anyway.
That's so funny, because this goes back to a conversation that we had about 2-3 weeks ago with Huda Assad, who is the lead infrastructure and big projects for UK and Ireland for the Accenture. Anyway, her point was, and I'm paraphrasing her, I'm not saying what she actually said, but she said that until government actually make it a requirement that people have to submit 3D models and work that way, they'll never do it. So if you just make it a requirement, people will start saying, right, we'll do it. You know? And as you say, because of fear of unknown, this will just create more questions, whereas in fact, that's not necessarily the experience.
Yeah, no,
would you concur with that? Do you think it should just be there?
100%. It should just be there. They've now, as I say, stipulated for government projects. They should really stipulate for all projects, and it should come in at the planning stage. So I don't know, where the resistance is internally. I know, speaking sort of to people in local authorities who are doing in like the smart Dublin ecosystem, and there are digital change officers and within each local authority, is even internally they're finding it difficult for people who are so busy and so under pressure with their workload that they just can't, they can't lift their head. They have their processes. They just need to, they feel that if they deviate, it's going to take time to implement something new, and there's. And that's maybe understandable, but it's really not part of our process. or what we've learnt in that process in Jersey. It was interesting because they tried doing it themselves in terms of managing that process.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't work out so good for a couple of reasons, because you can't assist somebody with submitting information and be an objective assessor at the same time.
Okay.
And there's so many different types of software that architects use that there's always small changes that they really need, especially going through the process for the first time, they need a little bit of assistance. So he said, listen,
Who needs the assistance? Sorry,
the architects, submitting architects,
okay.
submitting it rather than submitting something and then, an archi planner saying that doesn't fit, or it's not the right format,
That's a wrong model,
or wrong model, or wrong format, you did this wrong, whatever. So we said, well, let us help them submit it. So we'll be the technical guarantor. We'll ensure that it will be the correct format, and that's the other advantage of it. Everything is being assessed on a common technical ground.
Okay, so you're comparing with
exactly.
Yes.
Whereas in the current system, you're not.
Yeah.
There's so much variation in terms of what's being produced and different standards and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in this system, it's all. So we guarantee that. So we're there to help the architect. And since that process, since we were there, that the architects are much happier because they're not getting all this guff. And when we give them the model that they sign off on, the planners just get a model that works.
And it's probably the same in terms of their interface than it has been for all the others, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's the exact same.
So the planners then say, okay, I know how to use this.
Yeah,
and they don't have to have a whole load of different systems.
No, it's the exact same system for every single application.
Yeah, so that's definitely a model that worked in Jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So look, finally, I can't believe we've run out of time. In fact, we're over time. So in terms of the housing emergency tomorrow, let's say there was one concrete step that you would take, okay? And I'm obviously thinking of digital twins and the world that you live in.
Yeah.
What would you like to see happen that you feel would really kind of speed up the delivery of infrastructure and the kind of built environment?
Literally just sort of repeating what I said before, and I can use an example of a big infrastructure project that's trying to get approval in Cork, Lewis. If you go on to lewiscork.ie and download the plans, I would challenge anybody who's not from Cork to understand exactly where it's going and where it's coming from.
Okay.
We've taken the plans. Literally, we haven't done anything with it. We've just literally taken the plans and put them into our Cork 3D model and animated the Lewis along all the different stops. You can see exactly where it goes. And
what it looks like in reality, right? Based on
what it looks like in reality. Yeah. So it's.
Did you pay for that yourselves, or did you do it in conjunction with the council, or how did that work?
So most of the models we build are on commission.
Okay.
We decided, and which restricts us a little bit, because basically it means that they own the model, the asset they paid to create, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So we noticed that Ireland's second city didn't have the same digital twin activity as Dublin, and we decided to spend our own time over about 3 years just slowly building up a model of Cork. So we have that now. We hope people in Cork and Cork City, we do have lots of interest in it, but again, the framework there isn't there to use it. But it means that
you mean the framework in terms of?
There's no reason. There's not even the IT infrastructure. We're getting down to that.
Yes.
Isn't there? There's
within the council itself.
Within the council itself, in terms of the whole firewalling on how things are extremely limited in terms of software solutions, even down to that side of things, and that's common across a lot of councils. Isn't there to take it on? So there are technical challenges in the background that people need to solve as well.
Yeah.
But it means that we can, so we say, demonstrate things like this when we have the
model. Yeah. I mean, I suppose two organisations that I'm sure would love to hear who've got a more central role would be the LGMA, the Local Government Service, and also the OGCIO, the Office of the Government Chief Information Officer, because they're trying to look at, I suppose, centralised solutions that can be rolled across lots of different departments, rather than each department kind of inventing or reinventing the wheel to try and do many of the similar things. So I think it sounds like something that could be an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, I hope so. And I say the models are separate to the software. It's a bit like maps. The maps will run on different types of software, but the images and the actual content is on its own. But there's a huge opportunity to really speed things up, and we can see we're we need it. There
Good.
needs to be radical change.
Well, we're lucky in Ireland to have someone like you, and I'm sure there'll be more conversations you'll be having with different people within the government in the near future. But look, thank you very much, Gavin, for joining us on Transform Gov, and it's been fascinating. And thank you, and best of luck with all the new things that you're planning to do.
Great. Thanks very much, Maeve.
Okay, but before I go, I'm just going to say thank you to the team here in the studio manager Peter Rice, video editor Neil Horner, sound Lee Brennan and Richard Ryan, and also videographer Richard Ryan. So thank you for listening, and we look forward to seeing you on the next Transform Gov.